Okay, hello YouTube. What I want to talk about in this video is the limits of calculation and what we can do to sort of work around that and make ourselves better chess players so that we can calculate more accurately, more efficiently, and that we can basically improve on that one part of the game that most of us don't do very well. So if you like content like this and want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So the game that I always show people to show people the basics of calculation is I show people this game Edward Lasker versus Sir Thomas played in London in 1912. So it's basically just a Dutch defense. Lasker plays what's a lot of people call the fantasy variation, mostly just based on this game because this game is sort of everybody's fantasy. And then we're going to play this move, Queen H5, which sets up an immediate tactic. It sets up an immediate threat. So this is the part of calculation that people actually do pretty well, seeing things like tactics. If it's a position that you've seen before or that you've studied before and that you've memorized, it's actually very easy to see a combination, and it doesn't require much calculation at all. Seeing the idea of knight takes f6, gf6, queen h7 mate, for me, I saw this idea absolutely instantly because I've seen maybe hundreds, if not thousands, of puzzles that have this type of theme. So finding something like this is very, very easy for me. It's a pattern that's really well known and it's very easy to see. But this next bit is kind of hard. When Sir Thomas plays this move queen to e7, we have to start calculating. And once we start calculating, we start looking at checks, captures, and threats. So we would look at first at the kind of well-known sort of pattern move, knight to f6 check, but then we would quickly realize this doesn't work after gf6 and then queen h7. Now here's the thing. When you're looking at things like tactics and you're looking at things like well-known patterns, what you're incorporating when you do that is you're incorporating your long-term memory. When they did studies on, grandmaster and master level chess players, what they discovered was that grandmasters and masters, for the most part, focus a lot of their energy when they're thinking, when they put their brains under MRIs. We focus a lot of our energy on our long-term memory. That's the part of the brain that we're using. Whereas when amateur chess players were trying to play chess well, their brains were kind of all over the place, and they were, part of it was trying to calculate, part of it was trying to do this, but, a lot of it was being used on spatial recognition, just basically trying to visualize the board. But masters and grandmasters typically just used their long-term memory. So we're focusing on known patterns, positions that we've memorized in the past, and things that we've seen before. So then, when we have a position that's foreign to us, something that we haven't seen before, we have to start calculating. Now, when you start calculating, you have to hold each individual position. When you're calculating, you have to hold that in your head. And as people, as human beings, we're terrible at this. This is actually one of the reasons that computers got invented in the first place, is because your short-term memory can only hold about 8 to 11 things at once, and then you immediately start forgetting stuff. If you've ever had the experience of getting on a telephone and having a telephone conversation and having somebody tell you a whole bunch of stuff all at once, maybe 5 or 6 different things, but then while they're telling you those 5 or 6 different things, you have a conversation with somebody else, you walk over, you do something, and all of a sudden you forgot the first or second thing that they told you. And that's why a lot of us that are older that have, phones in the house, we have this habit of as soon as somebody starts talking to us and it sounds like they're going to give us a list of things, we grab a pen or something or a pencil and we start writing it down, because otherwise we know that we're not going to be able to remember once they get to about the 7th or 8th thing. So how does this translate to the problem with calculation? Well, when we start calculating, we can really only calculate about 4 to 5 moves ahead before we completely lose the position, and that's assuming that there's no sidelines. So if you're calculating 5 moves ahead, that's 10 positions. That's right on the outside of what any normal human can do. More than likely, you're really going to be more closer to the bottom end of that and not make any mistakes. So it's going to be more like 8 positions, which is about 4 moves ahead, which is really all most masters and grandmasters ever do, is they calculate short calculations very accurately. Even Magnus Carlsen himself said that he felt he was the best in the world at calculating short variations accurately. Basically 3 to 4 move combinations, but calculating them extremely accurately. And this game was kind of no exception. Edward Lasker had to start calculating this move, queen takes h7. And it's very difficult to keep all the moves in your head because it's not part of any sort of normal tactic. We don't have a lot of tactics that begin with sacrificing a whole queen for a pawn. So it's very difficult to see all the moves, but go ahead and try to visualize it while I show you here on the board. Queen takes h7, and then we're looking at king takes h7, and then we're looking at knight takes f6 check. So far, that should be fairly easy to keep in our head. I mean, we're only keeping track of, we've gone 2 moves ahead, so that's 4 positions. So now, if the king moves back, that's a 5th position, we have knight g6 mate. Again, still pretty easy to keep in our head. And now, with the king on h7, if the king moves up, now we can play this check, and then the king moves up to g5, and now we've reached our limit, right? Because now a lot of you are already getting lost who are watching this video, and you've reached your limit of what you can keep in your head, and it's very, very difficult for you to move forward. It's like moving through mud. Even Edward Lasker claimed that he didn't really even see the whole combination when he played it. He only calculated the king going to g5 and then just assumed that there was a win after that. But here's the technique that you have to use when you have these situations where you get caught in the mud. What you have to do is you have to calculate short variations accurately, and then you have to make an assessment. So when you calculated your first short variation of queen h7, king h7, and then knight f6 check, king h8, knight g6 mate, you can visualize that position in your head just fine. That's mate, that's over, that's mate. Now forget about it. Trust your assessment. Trust that that's mate with the king going back. And then look at king h6, knight back to g4 check, king to g5, make an assessment, go, okay, this looks like maybe white has really good attacking chances here. And then you have to, again, kind of immediately delete all the previous moves from your position, and then somehow try to hold the position with king g5 in your head, just hold that position in your head without thinking about any of the previous positions, and then simply calculate forward from there. And then it's a quick 4-move calculation from there. And now you're looking at h4, king f4, g3, king f3, bishop e2, king g2, rook h2, king g1, and then king d2 or castle queenside is mate. Now believe it or not, all of us should be capable of doing that. It's right on the outside of what we should be capable of doing. But all of us should be capable of doing that if we use that device. You calculate, assess, throw it away. Calculate, assess, throw it away. And then you have to trust your calculations and you have to trust your assessments. And of course, this is why you see a lot of grandmasters will make blunders, because they'll have some sort of blind side or something like that. A lot of times they looked at the position once, they threw it away, and then they started working on another position, and their assessment was incorrect. And you become a stronger and stronger player as you've seen more and more and more positions, and your assessments get more and more and more accurate. And that's how you become a stronger player. Because again, we're trying to basically use our long-term memory, our ability to assess, to make up for the fact that we don't have a great short-term memory. And we also use things like we clump, tactics together and make them into shorter groups. And we even try to do things like use mnemonic devices, etc. We use all of these techniques together to try to help ourselves calculate more accurately and more efficiently. But of course, a computer can do a position like this and not make a single mistake, because this is where computers really excel, is keeping track of a lot of different separate things all at once without losing track of them. And this is where human beings kind of do very poorly. But anyway, so just to show you that combination, it's queen takes h7, king takes h7, knight f6, king h6, knight g4, king here, and then the combination would have finished with something like h4, king f4, g3, king f3, bishop e2, king g2, rook h2 here, and then king d2 mate. Now what you may not have realized, because if you calculated that and you managed to keep it all in your head, once you made that assessment, once you realized it was mate, you were probably done, and then you could then make the moves and you could win the game, which is exactly what Edward Lasker did, because he was very disciplined at calculating. But there was actually a slightly faster checkmate here. He could have started with the move pawn to f4, which wins, but boy does it take a lot more positions to calculate, and it's actually a little complex. If king takes f4, we have g3, king f3, castle's kingside would be mate. And if after g3 the king goes back to g5, we would have h4 is going to be mate. And of course, it is also possible for the king to just sidestep all of this and go to h4, but again, we have a mate with g3, king h3, bishop f1, bishop g2, and then knight f2 would be mate. So in all these cases, we're still getting checkmate, but it is very hard to calculate that because you're calculating a lot of positions there. It might be, 2 3-move tactics and 1 4-move tactic, but none of them are, previously memorized tactics, and it's a very hard position to keep in your head. But again, if you use all of the techniques properly, and you're calculating, assessing, and then once you make that assessment, you kind of throw that position out. You try to visualize that position in the future, and then you calculate from there. You should be able to calculate these positions accurately and professionally and not make any mistakes. So anyways, I hope you found that video helpful. I hope you learned how to something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.